So let's go on with the fourth of the five good emperors, Antoninus Pius, ruling from 138 to 161 CE. So he was the adopted heir of Hadrian. So as a private citizen, he married Faustina. So they were a happy couple. Faustina was beautiful and renowned for her wisdom, and she spent her whole life caring for the poor and the disadvantaged of Rome. When she died, in honor of her memory, Antoninus asked the Senate to deify her, and he authorized the construction of a temple to be built in the Roman Forum in her name. So now the Roman Republican Forum is a displace, a showplace of this kind of monuments. Then he had various coins with her portrait struck, and these coins were script with Dive Faustine, with the meaning of divinized Faustina. The temple in the Forum is now dedicated to Antoninus and Faustina, and the inscription in the entablature reads, now is the church of San Lorenzo in Miranda, and that's why we have preserved the propylaeum, so the frontal part of the temple. The emperor and his Augusta, so his wife, were deified both after his death, Antoninus by Marcus Aurelius, his successor. So during his reign, he was surnamed, as we know, Pius, and his reign is remarkable for lack of incidents, perhaps because the reports were readily available to him of Hadrian's globetrotting missions that Hadrian used during the whole reign. And so he was able to spend most of his time at the center of government in Rome. He made one or two adjustments of frontiers, most notably in Britain, where he fortified a wall that was built right across the Clyde Ford Isthmus, some way north to the Hadrian's Wall. So it was there for a while, but then was abandoned and dismantled about in 165 CE. So from that moment on, Hadrian's Wall became once again the most northern frontier of the empire until about 400 CE, when the Romans withdrew from Britain. And here we have in the picture remains of a fortlet of the Antonine Wall. So after his peaceful reign, Antoninus died in his bed. By contrast, the successor Marcus Aurelius, the so-called philosopher emperor, had to spend most of his life in the field, even if he was a scholar. And he was at the head of his armies, and one of his armies brought back from an eastern campaign the most virulent plague of the Roman era, which spread throughout the empire. This is very actual, unfortunately, and eventually killed an estimated 5 million people. So this severely weakened the empire, as you can imagine. At the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 CE, the empire was once again undergoing a period of general unease. So, monuments about Marcus Aurelius. There used to be 2 triumphal arches dedicated to him, but now they have been completely lost. So we don't know where they stood. In the Capitoline Museum, there are reliefs from one of these arches. Then 8 reliefs from the other arch are now standing on the Arch of Constantine, who reused parts of previous monuments. So in this detail of one of the arches of Marcus Aurelius, we see him riding a triumphal chariot. This was celebrating one of his victories over Germanic tribes. And we can see a winged victory hovering over him and a trumpeter blowing a tuba. The tuba was a long horn used by the military to sound the advance and retreat. So probably there's portrayed his late wife too, called Faustina the Younger, another Faustina. So Marcus Aurelius, as you remember, it was adopted by Antoninus together with the son of the first choice of Hadrian. So he co-ruled with Lucius Verus from 161 to 169, when Verus died. So from sources we know that Verus obeyed Marcus as a lieutenant obeys the proconsuls or a governor obeys the emperor. Marcus was the most important emperor in between the two, but then from 161 he remained alone. Marcus was the last of the 5 good emperors, so-called, and he is also considered one of the most important philosophers of the time, of the Stoic philosophy. So Stoicism, coming from Greek stoa, was a school of Hellenistic philosophy, Greek philosophy, founded in Athens by a philosopher called Zeno of Citium in the early 3rd century BCE. So briefly, the Stoics considered destructive emotions to be the result of errors of judgment, and that a sage or person of moral and intellectual perfection would not suffer such emotions. During his reign, the empire defeated a revitalized Parthian empire. This war was called the Roman-Parthian War and was going from 161 to 166. This war was also called the Parthian War of Lucius Verus because Lucius Verus was in charge there, and was fought between the Roman and the Parthian empires, again over Armenia and Upper Mesopotamia. It was concluded in 166 after the Romans made successful campaigns into Lower Mesopotamia and a region called Media, and Aurelius' generals Avidius Cassius sacked the Parthian capital Ctesiphon, that you can see in the map down here. Then, what was the greatest threat in these times? In Central Europe, we see the first movements of great migrations. So, as the Goths were moving westwards, they were putting pressure onto Germanic tribes on the area. So, as a result, these Germanic tribes and other people launched raids along Rome's northern border, so the northeastern border, those fortified with wooden fortification by Hadrian, particularly into Gaul and across the Danube. Marcus Aurelius fought especially against a group of these Germanic tribes, the Marcomanni, Quodi, and Sarmatians, with success during the so-called Marcomannic Wars. But the threat of the Germanic tribes began to represent a very troubling reality for the empire. Then there was a revolt in the east, led by Avidius Cassius, but failed to gain impelling force and was suppressed immediately. You remember, it was general in the east, Avidius Cassius. So several rebellions, internal rebellions too. So the most famous wars, the Marcomannic Wars, called by the Romans Expeditio Germanica, were a series of wars lasting for the second part of Marcus Aurelius' rule until his death in 180. This wars saw the Roman Empire against the Marcomanni, the Quadi, the Sarmatians, and other Germanic peoples, along especially both sides of the upper and middle Danube. So, the struggle against Germanic invasion occupied, at least at the end, the major part of the reign of this emperor. So here we can see a map of the empire showing the location of the Marcomanni in the region of the upper Danube. Here, Marcomanni and Quadi. So let's see the evolution of these wars. In 177, the tribe of the Quadi rebelled again. So here is the second part of these wars. So followed suit by their neighbors, the Marcomanni, and Marcus Aurelius once again headed north to begin the second Expeditio Germanica, the second Germanic campaign. So he arrived in Upper Pannonia, that's modern Austria, in August 178 and set out to quell the rebellion, repeating what it had been his first campaign. So moving first against the Marcomanni and then in the last part of the campaign against the Quadi. So under the command of the general Marcus Valerius Maximianus, the Roman fought and prevailed against the Quadi in the decisive battle which took place in modern Slovakia. Then the Quadi were chased westwards, deeper into the greater Germania, where the Praetorian prefect Tarutenius Paternus later achieved another decisive victory against them. But on March 17, 180, the emperor died at Vindobona, modern Vienne. And you can see here a medieval picture of Vienne. So this general Maximianus has a name very similar to Maximus in The Gladiator. So the first battle in the movie The Gladiator, it's happening during these times, so during the Marcomannic Wars. And the old emperor that you see at the beginning of the movie is exactly Marcus Aurelius. So the successor of Marcus Aurelius, Commodus, had little interest in war. So against the advice of senior generals, he negotiated a peace treaty with the Germanic tribes and left for Rome. Then there he celebrated a great triumph, and he was then awarded and wanted the title of Germanicus Maximus for his victories over the Germanic tribes. But the war had exposed the weakness of Rome's northern frontier, and these wars were only the prelude of the great invasions that would eventually disassemble and end the Western Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th century CE. This is a portrait of a very young Commodus. This is the equestrian statue that stands in the middle of the square on top of the Capitoline Hill. And the original one is inside the Capitoline Museums. So the one in the square is a copy. Then another landmark in Rome as a memory of Marcus Aurelius is the column that we already mentioned. So replying the way of remembering the triumph over the Germanic tribes to the spiraling relief. And it's a victory column that stands today where there is the government palace, Italian government palace, Palazzo Chigi in Piazza Colonna, meaning the columns square. So Marcus Aurelius also bequeathed to posterity a book of personal meditation, written in Greek. So we already said that he was a scholar and a great philosopher. Much of this was written in the field while he was campaigning against the Germanic tribes, because he spent most of his time on field. So his so-called meditations are a great literary monument to a philosophy of service and duty, describing how to find and preserve equanimity in the midst of a conflict by following nature as a source of guidance for inspiration. So the meditations are an example of how the emperor approached the Platonic philosophical ideal of the philosopher king, and how he symbolized much of what was best about Roman civilization. So his reflections have influenced many writers and men of action. So he liked the first free moments of Rome, the time of Republic, a little bit as Tacitus. So he wrote most of his meditations at his base in Sirmium, modern-day Serbia. You can see here the ruins. And also while he was in Aquincum on campaign in Pannonia, in modern-day Hungary. So, from the death of Marcus Aurelius, we have a period of gradual disintegration, we can call like this. So the previous 84 years had seen just 5 emperors, the 5 good emperors. During the next 104, we will see 29. Alone of the 5 good emperors, Marcus Aurelius had a son, and he chose him as his heir. So his son was called Lucius Aurelius Commodus, and he was born during his father's reign. So he was emperor for 12 years till 192, and he also ruled as co-emperor with his father from 177. So he had elder brothers who died before him, so he was very young at the time. So his accession as emperor was the first time a son had succeeded his father since Titus succeeded Vespasian in 79. And Commodus was the first emperor saying born in the purple. That means during his father's reign, born during his father's reign. And then so with Marcus Aurelius was broken the succession by adoption and started again the dynastic rule. Then so Commodus was only 19 when he became emperor and was very similar to Nero. So initially had some grasp of affairs as Nero, but then, like Nero, got himself into the hand of favorites and corruptible freedmen. Then his private life was a disgrace, and his public extravagance prodigious. So it's a mixture in between Nero and Caligula. Then, like Nero, he fancied himself in the circus, and like Nero, died ignominiously. An athlete was burned to strangle him in his bath in 192 CE. So for sure, the reign of Commodus was the turning point in the greatness of Rome. So some historians have attempted to exonerate Commodus from the charge of innate depravity, and to attribute the failure of his rule to weakness of character and vicious associates. It is, however, undeniable that a condition which resulted in the slow but inevitable destruction of the Roman power was brought about by the lack of capacity and heavy life of this emperor named Commodus, coupled with the now over-centralization in Roman administration, by which, since the time of Augustus, the most absolute power in the state and religious affairs had been gradually vested in the person of the emperor. So every stage in the career of Commodus was marked by greed and suspicion, so producing a confiscation and numerous murders. So the result of this cruel policy was, for sure, hate from the people and the Senate, but one result was to divert attention for a time from the Christians, and so led to a partial cessation of persecution. He loved games of every sort. Once he ran 30 races in 2 hours. But his true passion was for gladiatorial exhibitions and athletic prowess. So his excesses culminated once in 14-day bloodbath of races, gladiators, and massacres. So for Commodus, the games were a great personal triumph, at least in this. So fostering his own belief in his superiority, but showing his weakness. So, for example, Commodus believed himself to be Hercules, as you can see in this picture. And Rome, for example, during his rule was renamed Commodianus, so with his own name. And the legions became known as Commodian. So here we can see his belief in his own superiority and to be the reincarnation of the great hero Hercules. So the main historical event of his reign took place in Britain, where the Antonine Wall was breached by one of the tribes in Scotland. So there his general had to campaign 3 times in order to evict the invaders. At his death, Commodus' body was placed in the mausoleum of Hadrian, Castel Sant'Angelo, but the Senate greeted the news of his death with glee. So the first natural heir to succeed to the throne, because he had not natural sons, was Pertinax. But so he was too the first natural heir to succeed the throne after the whole group of the good emperors. And so Commodus, for all the reasons we said, bequeathed cows to coming generations. The following emperor, Pertinax, was there only for a short time, and after him, the empire will be auctioned off to the highest bidder. Okay, so for the historical part, we end here for this week. Ciao!